It was great. It just seemed so easy, and yet it was a real thrill. I mean, it was as if you were doing the things that your heroes were doing, but obviously on a very small scale. I mean, this little funky little band, and we didn't really play that well, and you were just sticking your toe in the water. But it was just amazing to me how right it felt right away. I mean, in my deepest, darkest hours, when I walk on stage, I feel at home. And it always felt that way. The very first gig we played was a fraternity party, a beer bash fraternity party, in a house, a great big house that the fraternity had rented. And at first I closed my eyes and said, okay, I'm just going to sing. And I opened them and no one was paying any attention. They were all drinking and throwing up and making out. And I thought, and the band's playing and I'm singing, and I thought, yeah, this is great. And it always felt that way. It felt like it was very natural for me to be up there. It never was that kind of thing where, oh, I can't get away with this. It just seemed right. Well, you do it for yourself. I mean, there was no money. I mean, we didn't make any money when I made my first album. I think I was 28 years old, something like that. I was still working during the day while we were making the album. I mean, I had a job. Can't remember doing what right now. But I always worked because I always liked to have money in my pocket. There was no money in music. I mean, until you actually made a record and went on tour, and even then, it was very dicey about getting any real money. But we never made any money, never enough to live on. I always had to work. There were a couple of clubs where they would have bands, and we weren't old enough to get in. We were only 15, 16 years old, so we would hang out outside, and then we would meet somebody and say, come on, I'll sneak you in the back. So we would go and see the older bands, and learn from them. Then there was this club called the Upstage Club that opened up in around 67, I think it was, something like that. I don't remember exactly. And it stayed open until 5 o'clock in the morning. It opened at 9 or 8. And there was no alcohol, so kids could stay there, teenagers, us, all night long. And it had built-in amplifiers and speakers and microphones, and there were drums and keyboards. And so you could just go there and jam. And I was there every night. I was living with my parents at the time. I had moved, and eventually a lot of the musicians moved into this little house in Asbury Park. But it was about a half a mile from my house, and I would walk there every night. And I worked in the post office during the day, and I had on my post office, not uniform, but I had a blue shirt. I would go in right like that. I didn't care, and I looked like, Bruce said, I looked like a little old man, clothes I had on. But it was perfect. I mean, Bruce was there, Steve Van Zandt, Gary Talent. I can't even remember all the musicians that came out of there. And we all jammed. We all played in each other's bands. We would form bands, play different kinds of music, reggae, blues, rock and roll, jazz, whatever we felt like playing. And the audience was very forgiving because they knew that we were experimenting. And that's the great thing about Asbury Park audiences. They always were open to us experimenting, as long as we meant it, as long as we weren't jiving around. There wasn't a record deal to be had, believe me. I mean, we were all just learning our trade, and really we're just having fun. When I was doing it then, I met Bruce, and Gary Talent, Bruce's bass player, has been my friend since high school. I knew him before I knew any of the other guys. And he told me that he was going to be a musician when we were 15 years old, 14, 15 years old, when he first came to New Jersey. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe he had made up his mind that early that that's what he was going to do. It seemed so courageous. Then I met Steve Van Zandt, and he said the same thing. And then I met Bruce, and he said the same thing. And I went, well, if they're going to do it, I might as well try it too, I mean, it certainly beats working for a living. And so there wasn't really that competition thing. It was everybody trying to help each other out. And when Bruce got his first contract, I mean, we were over the moon. We thought that was the greatest thing in the world. Steven was writing. Bruce always wrote. I mean, the first time I met him, he was doing original material. I wrote some. Gary and I wrote some things. And, there were a lot of other musicians whose names Ricky DeSarno and Big Bobby and Vinny Lopez was there. And I mean, there were just hundreds of musicians. So we would all kind of write. Sometimes we would write on stage. So we would start a riff. I'd write lyrics, and a song would slowly emerge from that. We did original material, but we also were trying to learn all the different genres. Like I said, we played reggae, we played blues, we played rock and roll, we played rhythm and blues, soul, jazz, anything we could think of, My friend Albany Al Talone, was a folk guy who would also sing country songs. So we played behind him and played country music and folk music. And we just wanted to play everything. We wanted to learn everything. Nothing was better than anything else in a sense. It was all music. And we wanted to keep that open. Once again, we kind of knew it was a special time. So there was no real feeling of, there was no competition. It was more like just reveling in the freedom of being young, making music. Girls would actually talk to you, and and we had no money, so there's no jealousy because nobody had any money. It was great time.